They came with flags of peace, but carried fire in their hearts. In 1897, one of Africa's greatest kingdoms, the Benin Empire, fell not by the sword of enemies, but by the greed of men who claimed to be civilized. This is not just history. This is the story of betrayal, pride, blood, and the destruction of Africa's richest kingdom, a story they tried to erase. But we will remember. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button because here we uncover the hidden truths of Africa they never taught in school. Let's tell our story, the African story. Before 1897, Benin was not just a city, it was a world power, a kingdom of wealth, order, and divine artistry. From its mighty walls, a complex network of earthworks said to be longer than the Great Wall of China, to its streets paved with art, Benin stood as the heartbeat of West Africa's civilization. For centuries, it was a beacon of stability and sophistication, its society built on a foundation of intricate spiritual beliefs, advanced political structures, and an unparalleled artistic tradition. The city itself was a masterpiece of urban planning, with wide, clean streets, organized wards for different craftsmen, and a grand palace at its center, the nucleus of all political and spiritual life. The Oba was both a divine king and the spiritual guide of his people, a living link between the mortal world and the realm of the ancestors. His court was a dazzling spectacle of power and tradition, filled with chiefs, priests, and attendants adorned in vibrant textiles and exquisite coral beads. Trade flourished with Portugal as early as the 1400s, bringing new ideas and wealth into the kingdom. Ivory, pepper, textiles, and palm oil flowed through Benin's gates, making it a pivotal player in global commerce long before the scramble for Africa began. But as Europe's insatiable hunger for Africa's resources grew and the Industrial Revolution demanded more raw materials, admiration for Benin's prosperity slowly curdled into envy. The kingdom's self-sufficiency became a challenge to colonial ambitions. By the late 1800s, the British Empire, driven by its doctrine of trade, Christianity, and civilization, sought to dominate the lucrative trade routes across West Africa. Palm oil, a key ingredient for industrial lubricants and soaps, was the new gold, and the Niger Delta was its treasure chest. But the proud and independent Kingdom of Benin stood firmly in their way. Under the astute leadership of the Oba, Benin controlled its own trade, refusing to cede economic sovereignty to the burgeoning British commercial interests represented by the Royal Niger Company. The kingdom was self-sufficient, fiercely protective of its traditions, and unwilling to bow to foreign pressure. In 1892, the British sent treaties, dispatching Vice-Consul Henry Galway to secure a trade agreement that would effectively place Benin under British protection. The documents were filled with sweet words of friendship and mutual benefit, but their intent was poisonous, designed to strip the Oba of his authority and open the kingdom to unfettered exploitation. The Benin chiefs, wise to the deceptive nature of European diplomacy, saw the trap. In a moment of defiant clarity, they conveyed their leader's will. Our Oba will not sign away the soul of our kingdom. That courageous refusal, that powerful assertion of sovereignty, sealed Benin's fate. In the eyes of the British Empire, it was an act of defiance that could not be tolerated. In January 1897, the acting British Consul General, James Phillips, decided to force the issue. He organized a so-called peaceful trade mission to Benin City, ostensibly to negotiate new terms with the Oba. He did so hastily, without waiting for official approval from London and, more critically, without receiving permission from the Oba to enter the city. The mission was a calculated provocation, a thinly veiled display of colonial arrogance. Crates labeled as gifts for the Oba were loaded, but hidden within were weapons. It was a trap designed to intimidate the king into submission or create a pretext for military action. But Benin was not asleep. Its intelligence network was sophisticated, and scouts in the dense tropical forest soon spotted the approaching column. A runner, breathless and urgent, arrived at the palace with a warning. White men are coming, armed and many. The timing could not have been worse. The Oba, following ancient and inviolable customs, had declared the sacred Eagle Festival, a period of profound spiritual significance during which the king communed with the ancestors and the spiritual energies of the kingdom were renewed. During this time, no foreigners were permitted to enter the city, and the Oba could not receive visitors. Philip was warned repeatedly of this sacred custom, but he dismissed it as a primitive excuse to avoid him. Consumed by imperial hubris, he ignored the warning and pressed on. For the Benin chiefs, this was the ultimate act of desecration, a direct assault on their king, their gods, and the very fabric of their society, forced to act. A group of Benin warriors, led by the war chief Ologbaza, ambushed the British column in the dense, suffocating jungle. The confrontation was swift and bloody. Taken by complete surprise, Phillips and most of his party were killed. The British were defeated, but the victory was Pyrrhic. It came at a devastating price. News of the Benin massacre would reach London, and the full vengeful might of the British Empire would now seek retribution. In February 1897, just weeks after the ambush, Britain launched the punitive expedition, a campaign framed as a mission of justice, but executed as an act of pure, unadulterated destruction. It was one of the most technologically advanced military forces ever assembled for a colonial campaign in Africa, over 1,200 soldiers, armed with the latest Maxim machine guns, rockets, and rifled artillery, marched on Benin. It was a grotesque mismatch: machine guns against spears, modern firepower against flesh and courage. The Benin warriors fought with incredible bravery, using their knowledge of the forest to mount a fierce resistance. Chants of war echoed through the trees as arrows flew, and the Oba's royal guard stood firm, defending their homeland to the last man. But their courage was no match for the overwhelming force. The British column advanced relentlessly, burning villages and leaving a trail of death in its wake. When they finally broke through the city's defenses, they unleashed an inferno. The great city of Benin burned for days. Homes, shrines, and public buildings were turned to ash. The immense palace, the center of the kingdom's universe, was systematically looted and then torched. The soldiers went from house to house, seizing anything of value: art, bronze, ivory, the accumulated wealth and history of a civilization. Thousands of priceless artifacts were plundered and prepared for shipment to Europe. The Oba was captured. The kingdom, once a beacon of African civilization, was silenced by fire and steel. Oba, the Lion of Benin, the pillar of his people, was put on a show trial and forced to surrender. He stood before the British officers, stripped of his city and his army, but not his regal bearing. Calm and dignified even in the face of total defeat, he was a king to the very end, the British seeking to dismantle the kingdom's power structure completely, exiled him to Calabar, a city hundreds of miles away. He would never return to his throne, never again see the smoking ruins of his magnificent capital. They stripped him of his crown, but they could not strip him of his dignity. Even in chains, he carried the unbreakable spirit of a king who embodied the soul of his people. As he was led away into exile, a great sorrow fell over the land. Women wailed in the streets, men wept openly, and it was said that the gods themselves turned their faces from the desecrated land. Benin had fallen, its physical form was shattered, its political power broken, but its soul, carried in the memory of its people and the spirit of its exiled king, lived on. Over 3,000 bronze and ivory masterpieces were stolen during the sacking of the city. These were not mere decorations. They were the kingdom's historical records, sacred objects, and ancestral portraits, meticulously crafted over centuries. Bronze heads of past obas, intricate plaques depicting court life and mythological events, and exquisitely carved ivory tusks. Each piece was a chapter in Benin's glorious story. Today, these looted treasures sit in the sterile, climate-controlled glass displays of foreign museums across Europe and America, from the British Museum in London to the Met in New York. They are labeled as discoveries or acquisitions, but they were not discovered, they were stolen in an act of violent cultural theft. For generations, they have been admired for their aesthetic beauty, but divorced from their spiritual context and the violent history of their removal. Every bronze head, every carved plaque is a painful memory of what was lost. It is a silent testament to a brutal crime and a perpetual call for justice, a demand for the return of a people's stolen soul. Yet the spirit of Benin never died. It smoldered in the ashes and was reborn in the hearts of its people. It lives on in the art, the culture, and the resilient pride of modern-day Benin City. Today, artisans in the same ancient guilds still sculpt bronze using the lost wax technique passed down by their ancestors. Children dance to the same rhythms, and the new Oba's palace, rebuilt near the site of the old one, stands as a symbol of continuity and survival. The flame of Benin's civilization was not extinguished. It was merely hidden. Today, as Africa rises again, it does so not in silence, but in loud, proud remembrance. We are telling our own stories, reclaiming our history from the colonial narratives that sought to erase it, and demanding that our plundered treasures be returned to their rightful homes. The fight for the restitution of the Benin bronzes is a fight for the soul of a nation and a continent. The fall of Benin was not the end, it was a beginning. It was a tragic, brutal lesson, a reminder that our history is worth fighting for, our heritage is worth reclaiming, and our identity is worth preserving against all odds. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel. Let's rebuild our pride one African story at a time. Together, we rise.